everyone to today's session on AI and the future of legal recruitment. I'm very excited to introduce Sharon Henderson, who will be your presenter today. Sharon is one of the leading, most respected specialist legal recruiters in Australia, having successfully recruited lawyers, management, and HR staff to the legal industry for over 20 years. She's also the director and owner of Legal People, and today Sharon is back with popular demand, having spoken to our Practice Evolve community this time last year. Today, Sharon will be presenting on the latest legal industry recruitment trends for 2024. She'll discuss the key legal demographics and how this applies to your staff attraction and retention strategies. She'll also highlight the key areas of law in demand right now, discussing the shift from the previous year. The second part of her presentation will focus on how we can leverage Gen AI in HR and recruitment, and how AI is already being used by recruiters, candidates, and law firms alike. So before we get started, just some quick housekeeping items. There will be two opportunities for Q&A during Sharon's session. One is following her presentation on the current trends, and another Q&A to wrap up the second part of the presentation on AI. We have already received some really interesting questions from you during the registration process, but if at any point you've got more burning questions for Sharon, please submit them using the Q&A button below, and I will post them to Sharon and make sure they get answered. There will also be a very quick poll at the end, so please encourage you to just take a couple of seconds to provide your feedback so we can make these sessions better for you. And then lastly, this webinar is being recorded, so you can revisit the content at any point, and I will be sending out the recording to everyone that's registered in an email in the next few days. And then finally, before I pass on to Sharon, for those of you who are new here, we started the Intel series at Practice Evolve a few months ago as a platform to host and deliver meaningful and interesting content to legal professionals, both within and outside our peer community. We always aim to host subject matter experts like Sharon who talk about interesting topics, and we hope that our attendees can walk away with some tools to become more innovative, more strategic, or more competitive within their practice. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Sharon, and let's move on with the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Great to be back presenting this year as well. As a recruitment recruiter, but also a business owner of a recruitment business, I always like to start, before we look at the legal recruitment trends, about what's happening in the broader job market. So there are a few indicators I always pay attention to because it helps give us a bit of direction of what we can expect in the coming months. So first of all, I always look at the unemployment rate. So that has risen from this time last year, or the March quarter. We're now sitting at 3.8%. It is still a stronger than expected result. And in fact, April unemployment rate, which was just released last week, we're now sitting at about 4% unemployment. This is because the labour market continues to remain tight, with an unemployment to population ratio and participation rates still close to their record highs in November 2023. We will always have a percentage of the workforce that is unemployed, so our central bank considers 4.5% as full employment. So our current unemployment rate is sitting historically much lower than this. For instance, even if we compare it to pre-pandemic times, in the December 2019 quarter, just before the effects of the pandemic would have been felt, our unemployment rate was sitting at 5.1%. So we've still got a very low unemployment rate. The next factor we look at is inflation. So we're currently sitting at 3.6%. It's come down considerably from 12 months ago, and even at our peak of 7.8% in the December 22 quarter. This is obviously thanks to the record number of interest rate hikes we have experienced over the last 18 months in an attempt to bring our inflation rate down. Our government, however, has a target between 2 to 3%, so it's still higher than where they would like it to be. The other thing I look at is what LinkedIn research tells us. So they have produced a report recently that indicates that a whopping 3/4 of Australian professionals are considering changing jobs in 2024, which is up 15% from last year. The need for higher wages in a challenging economic environment and the desire for a better work-life balance were cited as the biggest motivators for changing jobs. Australians are also open to new career paths, with 52% of professionals actively seeking opportunities outside their current industry or role. The final indicator I like to look at is the National Jobs Index. So that is the number of jobs being advertised in Australia. So in the March 2024 quarter, which is our most recent quarter, we had a decline of 4.6%. Compared to a 2.8% increase this time last year. If we look at the National Jobs Index and how it compares over time, though, the March quarter represents the fourth consecutive fall. So the cumulative decline over 12 months in the National Job Index is now 22%. You can see the graph that job vacancies were at a record high in the quarter of 2023, but then have been decreasing ever since. You can also see flexible jobs, so that's that sort of grey line. That includes our casuals, our temps, our fixed term contracts. That fell the most by 14.7%, whereas perm jobs, which is the dark blue line, only fell by 1.4% in the last quarter. So perm jobs are holding up quite well. We can put this down to employers' recent experience with skills and talent shortages, which is still widely reported in many sectors, including legal. If an employer does want to hire, they are opting for permanent staff so they can lock in scarce talent. Another possible explanation is that the recent IR reforms are clouding the right and entitlements of casual workers and therefore their employers. Previously, employers were prepared to pay a premium for flexibility, but if that flexibility has been eroded, it might just be simpler to hire a permanent staff member. So this National Jobs Index and the decline we've seen over the last 12 months is not unexpected. Successive interest rate rises, high inflation, and a fragile global geopolitical landscape have combined to contribute to a contraction in the job market. But as you can see in the graph, even in March 2024, the National Jobs Index is still sitting higher than when it was in 2018 and 2019. If we're looking at the recruitment market now from a different angle, so this slide looks at not obviously analysing jobs this time, but looking at recruitment billings over the past 17 years. This slide, obviously there's perm billings being dark blue and temp being teal from 2007 until now. In 2009, you can see that there is a genuine and deep recession that impacted recruitment. It's a downward spike of some magnitude. We all remember that GFC time. In 2020, you can see the impact of the pandemic. So the global shutdown, a very significant decline in recruitment, and certainly the worst I've seen in my 23 years as a recruiter. On the upside, however, you can look at 2022. There is that most unexpected but very welcome post-COVID boom in hiring, but the levels of recruitment were not sustainable long term. This coincides with what we have seen in job ad volumes sitting 30% above pre-COVID conditions. Then comes the slowdown. So starting in 2023, it accelerates and continues into 2024. But it is nothing like the recession of 2009 nor the pandemic. Hiring continues and unemployment remains very low. Many skills, including legal, remain in short supply. So how does that translate to what we're seeing in legal for the first few months of this year already? We have definitely seen the job market stabilise. So the volume of roles is now at a level that we were seeing pre-COVID. So even going into just before COVID hit, we were in a buoyant market. The level of recruitment now more reflects that time. However, the demand in certain areas of law over the last 12 months has definitely shifted. And we'll talk about that in my next slide, where we focus on different areas of demand. Despite, though, the lower ad volumes, it is still a candidate-tight market in many areas of law, and quality candidates are still fielding and managing competing offers. What does that look like going forward? From our perspective, we see that the legal market is holding up well, despite these more challenging economic conditions out there. And according to the latest ALTMA survey that was done, most Australian law firms, so 56%, still intend to grow their numbers in 2024, which is quite encouraging. Compared to last year, the indication was 60%. So it hasn't been a massive drop-off in firms indicating their intention to grow their numbers. Now, in terms of areas of law and demand, I've broken it into 3 categories. So we're going to look at areas increasing, stabilising and decreasing. For the purpose of just making this clear, I'm focusing on lawyer recruitment in indicating what areas are in demand, but I will mention what we're seeing on the support side too, since we also recruit in that space. In terms of areas increasing, definitely employment and workplace relations. And that's at all levels of PQE. Employment law teams remain very busy, particularly advising clients around amendments to the Fair Work Act, around casual employees versus independent contractors, and also the right to disconnect legislation coming into effect in August. So we're seeing huge demand in this area. Family law is another one that has been so busy even when COVID hit, and it has kept accelerating. The demand for family law has never been as high as I've seen in the last 23 years. In fact, it's probably been our #1 area of recruitment at the moment. If I compare it to pre-pandemic times, even the amount of lawyers that were recruited in this space in the last 5 months is probably sitting 5 times higher than we would normally recruit. And again, all levels. Personal injury law, so this is referring more to the plaintiff side. The demand there has been more in mid-level lawyers, so 2 to 5 years. And this has been in institutional abuse law, thanks to the retrospective changes in the law, which has resulted in more claims. So we're seeing a lot of PI firms boosting up their abuse law teams. We've also seen work cover and just generalist PI lawyers. The demand there is holding up quite well too. Litigation's an interesting one. We're seeing the demand more for mid-level lawyers. Again, that 2 to 5 year for commercial litigation and also insolvency law. So according to ASIC's latest data, we have seen a 36% increase in the number of companies entering into external administration, with the construction industry having the highest number of company failures, followed by accommodation and food services. This increase in insolvencies is expected, as insolvencies were reduced by more than 50% during COVID, which kept phantom businesses afloat due to government moratoriums and various stimulus packages. This also meant that new lawyers were not necessarily getting the exposure to insolvency work over the past couple of years. So we are now seeing a permanent skills shortage of insolvency lawyers, particularly around that 2 to 4 year level. So what I say to my clients who are recruiting in this area, if you're looking for an insolvency specialist at that level, it is going to be very challenging to find one. You're better off finding a commercial litigator who has done some insolvency work and who's keen to specialise. Another area that I've put in as increasing, because we do recruit quite a bit in the in-house space too, we've certainly noticed this market pick up over the last couple of years, and it has certainly remained strong so far for 2024. There's been particular demand in biotech, pharmaceutical, life science areas, but we've seen companies come to us from all different industries looking for experienced legal in-house counsel. The demand has been more at that senior legal counsel level. So typically that's sort of senior associate level in a law firm. With most in-house roles at that level paying anywhere between 180 to 220 package range. And that continues to build momentum in that in-house market. On the support side, in terms of areas that have been increasing for support staff, it really has mirrored what we've seen for lawyers. So family law PAs, huge demand for them, extremely challenging to find experienced family law PAs, also personal injury PAs, employment and litigation. They would be our top 4 areas that we're seeing on the support side. For areas that are stabilising, we're seeing commercial law after the massive boom we've experienced throughout 2022 and 2023. that area of law is really starting to stabilise. There are still roles out there, though, for senior associate and special counsel levels. We do have many of our particularly bigger firm clients still looking for experienced commercial lawyers. But it is quite challenging. Despite the roles dropping back in that area and stabilising, it's still challenging to find them. We find that lawyers at this level tend to want to go in-house. Also, in terms of stabilising construction law, so that includes both front-end and back-end construction, no doubt due to a decline in the market in that space, and that's had a knock-on effect with the recruitment market really stabilising this year in that area. Also, wills and estates, so that includes wills, probate, estate planning, succession planning, estate litigation at all levels. That area has started to stabilise as well. Defendant insurance, so that was really booming coming out of COVID over the last couple of years. The demand this year, though, has really stabilised at all levels, and we're not seeing as many roles pop up in that area. And same for tax. Again, that area has stabilised. For support staff, again, we've seen the areas stabilise in commercial law, in IP secretaries, even in reception and accounts roles. Again, they were quite busy last year, but those areas have also stabilised. In terms of decreasing, so probably no surprise to all of us would be property law. So that area has certainly decreased, I should say, at all levels. There are still roles popping up though, but we're not seeing also candidates suddenly appear on the market. Unlike the GFC, when we saw property lawyers being made redundant, we're not seeing that at all. So they're just staying tight and staying push. But again, they're still hard to find, but the demand for them from a recruitment perspective has certainly dropped back. Litigation too at the senior level. So the demand right now for litigators is more at that 2 to 5 year. That's where the roles are popping up, not so much at senior associate or special counsel level. On the flip side, though, for commercial law, the demand has really decreased at that junior to mid-level. So that 2 to 5 year level, that's where the demand has really dropped back. In terms of, we also recruit HR roles for many of our bigger clients. So I've put this in as an area that's decreased as well. So having recruited quite a lot in HR over the last couple of years, particularly coming out of COVID, this year, particularly at that advisor and business partner level, there have been fewer roles in the market. So I've put that as an area that's been decreasing for anyone interested who's got that HR lens. In terms of support staff, again, it's quite consistent. So the demand for property secretaries has dropped back. Same with conveyancing law clerks. After huge demand the prior couple of years, that demand has really dropped back. And also floater secretaries and document production specialists, those areas have really dropped back too. Now moving on to the Australian legal industry demographics. So I think it's always interesting to see what makes up the legal population. So we have just over 90,000 lawyers in this country, which represents a 53% increase in lawyers since 2011. 55% of our lawyers are female in the profession. 86% of those entering the profession are female. So that gives us food for thought. In order to have adequate succession planning for the future, law firms do need to ensure they have attractive paid parental leave policies in place to not only attract but also retain their staff. We do receive lots of inquiries, both from female and male lawyers alike, asking about your paid parental leave policies and what they look like, even more so than ever before. Almost half of our lawyers are aged between 25 and 39. So that's our millennial and Gen Z generations. Gen Z are aged between 12 to 27 years old. So they're our interns, our graduates, our paralegals, junior lawyers, typically up to associate level. By 2030, Gen Z will comprise a third of the Australian workforce. Now, for those of you that listened to my presentation last year, I did speak a lot about Gen Z behavioural traits. But just to quickly recap, current statistics suggest that 1.5 to 2 years in a postgraduate position for Gen Z is becoming standard. And that's certainly what we're noticing. But even for lawyers admitted around 2020, 2021, it is not unusual that they're already on their second or third role by now. For Gen Z, they want to know what you stand for and what your company values are and whether they align with their own. So they're very big on value alignment. They also want to be rewarded for their efforts, but not at the expense of having a work-life balance. So they certainly take a more holistic approach to their needs. We still look at 67% of lawyers are in private practice, so the vast majority still work in private practice as opposed to in-house government or not-for-profit sectors. So these figures in private practice show that with genders are now represented more equally, if not a little bit swayed towards female lawyers, it makes the achievement of gender parity pay even more important. Firms and key decision makers are now understanding the importance of having a diverse and inclusive workplace, not only in attracting people, but retaining them, also for productivity, engagement, and competitive advantage. Looking at a survey that's conducted annually by Lawyers Weekly at the start of each year, it looks at the intentions of private practice employees and what they plan to do over the next 12 months. So the idea that nearly 1/5 of a firm's fee earners are planning to find a new employer in the next 12 months should offer food for thought on how best to retain staff. Firms can also take solace, though, that fewer private practice lawyers have expressed a desire to move on than was the case last year, so 18 versus 28% the previous year. What I thought was interesting about these findings is that less expressed a desire to move to another firm. So only 41% of those prepared to look at moving would go to another firm compared to 57% the prior year. Also, we did notice an increase in people wanting to stop practicing law altogether. So that has gone up quite significantly at 23% versus 10% the prior year. So taking into account all those economic factors and areas of practice, these are the top 10 trends that we've identified so far for 2024. One is definitely the market stabilising and resembling pre-COVID levels of recruitment. Another one is salary bandings are also that has that knock-on effect. So salaries are starting to stabilise for lawyers too. So we're no longer seeing those incredible increases in salaries that we did in the prior 2 years. And also sign-on bonuses have dropped back too. Legal secretary salaries are also stabilising. So our senior legal assistants, that's sort of capping out now around that 95K package mark. It is still incredibly challenging to find good quality legal assistants. Clients are also looking at candidates now from non-legal backgrounds to fill their support roles. And some clients are also considering law students to fill their roles, particularly if they have at least 1 year minimum left on their study to complete. Another trend is trying to realign candidate expectations in a changed market conditions, particularly for our Gen Z candidates. So candidates are not getting those massive pay increases to change jobs they have been over the last 2 years. And it really is about educating candidates around these changes and what they can expect. Part of our process is obviously understanding what their motivators are for changing jobs. If it's purely about salary and they're already at a market level for salary, then they probably need to rethink about whether the move is worthwhile. If it's due to other factors beyond just salary, then that's something we consider. There has certainly been a pushback by firms to get staff to return to the office as well. However, employees are wanting to retain some form of flexibility. It is almost impossible to fill a role that requires a 5-day per week in office attendance. On the flip side though, not many people want to work 100% remote either. So most are happy with a balance. I would say the vast majority of our law firm clients have still retained their flexible work practices, with approximately 80% requiring a minimum of 3 days in the office and 2 from home for professional staff. And we rarely get pushback from candidates on this. For support staff, firms are doing different things. So some there is a push for 5 days in the office, others it's 3-2 or 4-1 arrangements. Support staff candidates are still wanting to retain some working from home days. And candidates are also wanting this ideally stipulated clearly in their employment contract or in an email confirming their working conditions. Another trend we've seen is firms restructuring, particularly upper mid to top tier law firms, to ensure their cost structures are right for changed market conditions. So this has led to some redundancies. However, people are finding jobs fairly quickly and they're not unemployed for too long, which is pleasing to see. This is something I kept in my slide from last year. I can't stress that enough, that even in changed market conditions, it still remains a candidate type market. So the recruitment process does not stop with acceptance of a job offer. It really is important to get out the employment contract ASAP and keep up the regular communication with them as they work down their notice period. I can guarantee you, if they are a strong candidate, their current employer has 4 weeks to try and get them to change their minds. So it's really important to keep up that engagement with your new hire and to make them feel already part of your team. Firms, I think, are doing a much better job on focusing on their succession planning for lawyers and support staff. And this has come about given how tight the legal market has been over the last couple of years. So they're certainly having a look at their strategies. This includes revamping their paid parental leave policies. I think law firms are focusing better on what they can offer a new employee, whether it be through their EVP, their perks and benefits, providing more detailed information in their job briefs, about providing more information about the team structure, the career progression opportunities and the culture of the firm. Bigger firms are also considering reintroducing their support staff traineeships too. This year in particular, I would say probably since I would say over the last 12 months, actually, we've definitely seen a push by corporates and law firms for more gender equality. Despite female lawyers continuing to outnumber their counterparts and dominating in every area of the legal profession, men still make up the majority of leaders within the profession, as the ever-pervasive pay gap continues to exist within the legal industry. For the first time, Australian workplaces with 100 or more employees have been required to publish the base salary and total remuneration median gender pay gap with the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. A search of legal workplaces revealed that less than half of firms have a gender pay gap below the sector average. So there is still a lot of work to be done in this area. In areas of law or teams where there is underrepresentation of females, our clients have been requesting to include female candidates in the shortlist. We've particularly noticed this trend with our in-house clients. Number 9, candidates are more informed than ever before. They are asking us a lot more detailed questions about you guys before they even decide whether they would like to have their application submitted. So they're doing a lot more online research about your company to see what they can find out. So think about how you portray yourselves online, particularly your LinkedIn company page. We find, even from our own experiences, and we do have quite a massive following in our LinkedIn community, sharing an employee milestone. For instance, one of my colleagues, Rosie, she had her 10 years with us in February this year, or celebrating a birthday and posting, humanising that sort of communication. Those posts get far more engagement than us putting up a blog or reposting a legal news update. So people want to see the human side of your business. With the exception, we always find these 2 areas get huge traction for us anytime we post about them. If we talk about flexibility and what law firms are doing and paid parental leave policies, we find those 2 topics in particular always get a lot of engagement. Our final trend is AI and how we can integrate AI technology in our recruitment process. So that will be the next part of my presentation. That will take this opportunity now to pause and see if we have any questions in relation to what I've just discussed in legal recruitment trends.
Thank you, Sharon. We do actually have a question that's come through. could you provide examples of some tasks we can provide to candidates to assess suitability, knowledge, and competency?
Okay, so it depends on what level you're recruiting for with lawyers, but it's not uncommon. For example, with my family law clients, they will ask for a sample of work that the candidate has produced as part of their employment. So it might be an affidavit, it might be a letter of advice. So normally they would ask for two different styles of documents, obviously with information redacted. But it gives them an opportunity to assess their writing style. So I think that's always a good test, particularly in areas of law which require a lot of drafting. Others, even in-house, I had one client recently put together a bit of a legal exercise in how to interpret information and what advice they'd give to the company as part of their process. I guess in terms of even asking questions in the interview about competency-based questions, to ask candidates to give examples of different things that they've done. We actually have on our website, on the Legal People website, a great catalogue of interview questions that you can download. It was written for us by a former advisor from one of the top tier law firms. But it really is a great comprehensive guide that you can read through and pick out the questions that you think might be relevant to your business. So I'd certainly suggest looking at that too.
Thank you, Sharon. We do have another question, which you may have already touched on in your previous slide, but might be good to recap for this person.
Sure.
Have you seen a significant increase in candidates' salary expectations or what they want in their next role?
So we certainly have over the last 2 years, but this year has been more about candidate managing realigning their expectations, really. So some, I think, have been a bit surprised about the change market conditions because obviously we're recruiting 365 days of the year, whereas when a candidate pops their head up, they're not always aware what's happening in the market unless someone tells them. So we have done a lot of, I guess, managing expectations with candidates so far this year in giving them feedback about the change market conditions.
Thanks, Sharon. That's it for questions for this part.
Great. So we'll move on to the next topic. So, according to Morgan Stanley research, Gen AI technologies will likely affect a quarter of all occupations today, rising to 44% within 3 years. Given the rapid pace of Gen AI adoption, it's safe to say both human and digital workers, being AI, will make up the modern workforce. As a result, recruiters, just like lawyers, must now consider how to leverage Gen AI to achieve more for their clients. In the recruiting world, leaders can use Gen AI to make workforce predictions and plan future talent strategies. Gen AI can also help employees become more productive on their day-to-day, helping with rote tasks like drafting content and, in the case of HR, answering employee queries. It is less likely employees will lose their job to AI, and more likely they will lose them to AI-trained professionals. So recruiting and HR teams also increasingly focused on hiring staff. They are looking at already digitally savvy people, so that can help take their business to the next level in a world where AI will be commonplace. In response to the global demand to upskill, as an example of what one global employer is doing, PwC has invested $1 billion in training its workers on AI, with courses on topics such as the ethics of AI, responsible use of AI, and how to create AI prompts to generate the best results. Companies around the world will follow suit by offering better resources for upskilling through programs such as in-office workshops, partnerships with academic institutions, mentoring schemes, and trials that expose workers to multiple parts of the business. So what we're seeing, AI is rapidly evolving right now. And really, this has taken off more just since the start of this year. There's a massive, big upskill in training HR professionals and recruiters on when, where, and how to use AI. even ourselves as an organisation, we've already gone to at least 3 seminars on AI, and we've got another one coming up next week. So we're all rapidly trying to upskill in this area and stay ahead of how and when we should be using it. AI is definitely being used by candidates already and hiring managers and recruiters as part of the recruitment process. And we'll start to look at that in my next slide. So how's the recruitment industry using Gen AI? Certainly through our recruitment management systems, we use a very popular one called Job Adder, very popular amongst recruiters, and even some of our corporates and law firm clients use it. They released just in early March this year AI to create compelling, detailed and well-defined job descriptions and job adverts. So you can easily upload your briefing notes with a client's job description, and it will create a job advert within seconds. You can also tailor the tone of your voice. So you can choose between a balanced professional or casual tone to align with your company style or to the ideal candidate's persona. It is great from a perspective of efficiency and saving time writing from scratch a advert. And at least being the first draft, and it gives you that opportunity to edit the advertisement as well. AI is being used in marketing automation and database cleansing, so automatically sending out emails to candidates who have not been active for a while and seeing if they want to remain on the database or update their details. It's being used in chatbots to answer simple candidate queries. Also, LinkedIn have just released their feature in April to draft tailored approaches to potential candidates with an auto follow-up after 7 days. This is something we have been playing around with. Personally, I find that LinkedIn's tone is very Americanized, and it's not the way that we necessarily talk to each other as Australians on email. I think it will be interesting to see how AI evolves over time and how it'll be different in different markets, because I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach suits every market. And I think there's still a bit of work to be done in that space. ChatGPT is being used to help write content for LinkedIn posts. I know in speaking to other recruitment business owners, they're using it for drafting candidate summaries, for instance. Even interviewing online. So, for instance, we use Zoom when we do online interviews. That Zoom released their AI feature just last month. It now summarises the meeting, setting out the key points, and it will send you that summary via email automatically after the meeting, and it's literally within seconds. You can then go into Zoom and edit that summary to just clarify any facts, but it does save a lot of time. Now, how are candidates using Gen AI? So according to LinkedIn research, Australian professionals are finding it hard to keep up with the rapid changes in skills required to do some jobs, largely driven by the rapid developments in AI. 33% of professionals said that they did not know how to match their skills to jobs they want, making the job search process even more difficult. 42% of professionals say they are experimenting with new formats such as video and digital resumes. They are also keen on using AI to help make their job hunt more efficient and productive, with 50% of Australians saying they are currently using AI to help them land a new job. So candidates are using AI in a number of ways. They're using them to write their cover letters and emails to hiring managers. They're using them to enhance their resumes and even to draft responses to interview questions. So I remember meeting a junior lawyer just recently who was putting into ChatGPT the standard questions she knows should be asked in an interview and asking ChatGPT's response and then tailoring her response from that. You can check if a candidate is using AI, and there's 2 websites to bring to your attention, aicheckertool.com or zerogpt.com. So I know for all of us, one of the skills that we all look for in a lawyer is their strong drafting and written communication skills. So how do we now assess that if we're using AI, if they're using AI, sorry, to write their resumes and cover letters? So as we sort of talked about in our Q&A section, I think the interview process itself and how they articulate their answers will be really important to assess. And even maybe asking for a sample of their work or getting them to do a legal exercise. I don't think it's always necessarily a bad thing that they are using AI. We do want people to keep up with using all sorts of different technologies out there. But it's certainly something we're noticing a lot, even with candidate resumes, even their candidate summary of how they describe themselves. I've copied and pasted that information into those tools and it has come up as being AI generated. So we've talked about how Gen AI is being used in the recruitment industry, which will continue to rapidly evolve over the coming years. But what are the key benefits and risks we need to be aware of when using AI? So in talking about the pros, obviously it can speed up high volume roles, such as those entry-level admin roles, receptionist roles, graduate hiring, where the resume requirements are pretty straightforward and a large number of applications are expected. AI recruiting software can help to pre-screen candidates and get the recruiter's job done faster. By way of example, we were recruiting an entry-level admin role for a client of ours recently, and we had over 2,000 applications for that role. Using AI would have definitely helped speed up that process. And we know, because we typically don't recruit a lot of high volume roles, but I think you could definitely see the use for AI in those areas. In speaking to another recruitment business owner recently, they are just spending nearly $14,000 in implementing AI technology for their high volume roles. It can also reduce admin work. So, helping write the first draft in a job description or a job advert, helping summarize a meeting, using chatbots to respond to straightforward candidate queries. It can also help diversify your talent pool. So, Gen AI is not subject to subconscious bias like humans are. It's not scanning resumes to determine gender or passing judgments on a candidate's name or cultural background. It is simply screening to ensure the minimum level of requirements are met for the candidates to be taken to the next stage. It can also enhance the candidate experience by streamlining and simplifying hiring processes, which leads to a quicker response time and keeping candidates regularly updated. I know the biggest bugbear of candidates when they're applying for roles is never hearing back from a recruiter or an employer. And so that's something we're very big on, is trying to get back to them with feedback or giving them an update. And it's amazing how much they just appreciate that. In terms of the cons to consider, you can get a variable quality of candidate. So if you rely on AI alone to do your screening, you risk missing out on prime candidates in the event that tech fails to read between the lines on resumes and applications. Recruiters and hiring managers must always retain ownership of the process and be prepared to review everything AI creates to ensure it aligns with hiring objectives. So in other words, you need to think of AI like an intern to help with the grunt work, but we need to take responsibility for managing the process and ensure things go smoothly. The other con, which is a very big negative for me, is the loss of human touch, which is why we're cautious about over-automating too many processes. We want candidates to feel appreciated, that they can talk to us and get feedback. Where an AI automated system might win in efficiency, what can be lost for candidates, recruiters, and employers alike is the sense of how individuals doing their job might fit together in real life. So things we need to be mindful of when using AI. AI cannot be empathetic to a candidate's situation. It doesn't have the critical thinking and the emotional intelligence to always decipher what is said in a conversation or not said, like a human can. It doesn't have the context to discussions. We cannot rely on AI to be accurate, and we need to manually fact check to ensure accuracy. Even according to a Stanford University study only published last week, Gen AI tools designed for the legal industry make up false or misleading information between 17 and 33% of the time. So even as Gen AI automates recruiting tasks, the human touch will still be critical. Recruiters will distinguish themselves by doing things that AI can't do, such as forging ties to candidates and offering positive candidate experiences. As a result, soft skills will become even more important. In fact, the top 3 recruiter skills cited by hiring pros in a recent LinkedIn survey were human skills: communication, relationship building, and adaptability. Being adaptable and open to learning new things will be especially important for recruiters harnessing AI recruitment tools. In the legal industry, we need to be mindful of the candidate experience. I definitely think there is a place for AI in high volume recruitment roles, such as graduate recruitment campaigns. However, for roles we typically recruit, which is usually from about 2 years PQE and above, legal has consistently been a candidate type market. So human interaction and building relationships, particularly long-term with people, is absolutely paramount. Otherwise, we risk losing a great candidate. Another con to consider is the investment in AI. So whether we're talking about a financial outlay for specialist AI tools or dedicating employee time for training, incorporating AI into the recruitment process is an investment, and one that does not make sense for all size businesses. So while AI can work wonders in high volume recruitment, it might not provide much return for smaller companies who hire irregularly or complex roles that have variable qualification requirements, as is often the case in legal. The final con to consider is the privacy. So a recent survey by KPMG indicated that 63% of consumers were concerned about the potential for generative AI to comprise an individual's privacy by exposing personal data to breaches or through other forms of unauthorized access or misuse. We do need to be mindful of how you are using AI and how sensitive information is being stored. For instance, if you're using Gen AI or ChatGPT and putting information into ChatGPT and pressing the button for them to generate a different response, how is that information being stored and for how long? So there's some of the privacy concerns, particularly in legal, that we need to consider as well. So it is about striking the right balance between AI and human-centric recruitment. Using AI in the recruitment process certainly has many benefits, but incorporating it into, but before you incorporate it into your talent acquisition strategy, you need to carefully consider how and when it can help you. So thank you for listening to my presentation today. Certainly happy to address any queries, whether it might be AI related or even back to legal recruitment trends that might have popped up since.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We do have a couple of questions. There's one that's come through. You've already answered this one to an extent, but there is a question around, should I be concerned about prospective employees using ChatGPT to write covering letters for job applications?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. To be honest, I don't pay a lot of attention to cover letters anyway. It's certainly used if I can't find the information I need out of a CV and trying to understand, for instance, perhaps movement in their CV, but I don't put much emphasis on the cover letter. I do think more and more candidates will use ChatGPT and AI to write their cover letters for sure, because it will, I guess, be a quicker process for them. But you know, people will be using AI in what they do anyway. So I think we just need to be mindful of that. And I don't place too much emphasis on the cover letter anyway.
I guess it goes back to some of the tasks that during the interview process you can implement to help you screen the validity of the competency of the applicant.
Yes, definitely.
But cover letter. One more question for you, Sharon. So what should law firms be doing to stand out from their competitors, or more, what have you seen some of your clients do that has been successful for them?
Yeah, so It always is a very competitive market for legal talent, no matter what economic conditions we find ourselves in. It's just really the areas of law that change in different economic circumstances. So you always need to be putting your best foot forward to a prospective employee. And I can think of one of my smaller clients in particular that do this exceptionally well. They have a one-page EVP flyer, PDF flyer, that they make sure that I give every candidate who's interested in having a chat with them. And it really summarises everything that they stand for, their values, their perks and benefits, why you would choose them. And we always get so much great feedback from candidates around that EVP flyer. And not many firms are doing that. It doesn't take much to do it. But that would be a recommended tip, I would say, if you're looking to remain competitive. They often, when their candidate is managing competing offers, which is often the case, they will often choose them because of who they stand for and the way they come across and present themselves. So they do that very well. And this is a firm that's been growing from strength to strength over the last couple of years. I think also another tip would be making sure that you keep the recruitment process moving at a good pace. I mean, you don't want to be overly keen with feedback within the hour, but at the same time, you want to make sure that feedback is getting back to the candidate within 24 hours of an interview. Particularly if you are interested in them, you want to make sure the process keeps going along smoothly and not having unnecessary delays. And I think the way you present yourselves on LinkedIn, just be mindful, like anything, I say this to my candidates, be careful of the content you're putting yourselves out there in social media, because anyone can search your name. The same goes for the other way. I think trying to personalise who you are and what you stand for in your LinkedIn company page certainly goes a long way too. And I've got a few clients that do that really well, and I get good feedback from candidates that notice their LinkedIn page.
Thank you. I've noticed actually a good point around the EVP. More and more companies are starting to put part of that into their job descriptions as well. So it's not solely focused on your experience and what you will be doing in the role, but also what the company can offer you in return, which I think is really good.
Absolutely. And it's something, particularly our Gen Z candidates always ask. They want to know your values and what you stand for and what you can offer beyond just the normal salary. So they're looking for that holistic approach, and that's where I think it's really very important for law firms to articulate who they are and what they stand for as a point of difference. If they know what their point of difference is to other law firms, we need to really articulate that well to the market.
Thank you, Sharon. That's all for the questions, and thank you for a really informative presentation.
My pleasure.
What I might do now is just launch the quick feedback poll for those of you who are still on. We've got a couple more minutes, so I might keep the Q&A open and see if anything extra comes in. But just a question for you, well, not really a question, but something that I found quite interesting from your presentation, Sharon, is when you said that we shouldn't be concerned about Gen AI taking over our roles, but more so the people that are trained in Gen AI taking over the roles, which I thought was a really good point.
I definitely think it's like anything. As we evolve in all sorts of different types of technologies that we use, we always need to continue to adapt and evolve, and not see it as a negative, trying to think, okay, well, how can Gen AI help my business? How can I leverage it in a safe way? I think it's very much in its infancy, though. I think even LinkedIn, Facebook, recruitment management systems and practice management systems with law firms, they're only introducing their first version this year. And some have only just come out in the last sort of 1 to 2 months. So it's very, very new technology, and it's certainly not perfect. So it'll be interesting to see over the next 12 months to 2 years how that will continue to evolve. And I'm sure it will continue to evolve in a positive way. But even just trialing it in your own business and getting a feel for, how it's used and whether you think it's worthwhile using is a good way to start.
I think a really important piece of advice that you gave just before is see how you can incorporate it before making the investment, because I think it's quite easy to try and jump on the hype wagon because we think everyone's implementing AI, using AI, but the reality might be a little bit different behind the scenes. So before justifying the investment, can it really help you, especially for those smaller firms, as you mentioned, that don't do a lot of high volume recruitment?
Yeah, exactly. It certainly wouldn't make sense from a recruitment perspective if you don't hire often, and typically looking at hiring experienced people, because I think using Gen AI would be you just wouldn't get the cost benefit analysis out of that. I mean, even a recent example, I was recruiting an in-house role for a client recently, and we presented 2 candidates, and on paper, if AI had been involved in the recruitment, they would have chosen the stronger candidate on paper because that person ticked every single box our client was looking for. Whereas the other candidate, I had to convince my client to see, because I thought she had other qualities she could bring to the role. And in the end, they chose the candidate that I recommended, who didn't necessarily look as strong on paper, but was stronger in the interview process. So that's what AI can't pick up. You still have to have that human element in any process, whether it be recruitment or legal.
That's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
as a hiring manager as well, you know your team, you know how the company functions, how your team functions. So finding that cultural fit is so important because, of course, the experience of the candidate is important, but a lot of these things, this is my experience, you can pick up on the role in the job in terms of processes and what system the firm is using, but you can't really pick up the cultural fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't, AI can't do that for sure.
Oh, well, thank you so much again, Sharon. I really appreciate your time today. The presentation was excellent. I've learned a lot personally, and I hope to have you on again.
My
which
pleasure.
I'm sure. Thank you,
Loved
everyone,
it.
for listening.
And
Great.
if anyone has any questions, feel free to, my email's up there. So feel free to reach out to me, send me an email. Always happy to have a chat and address any queries you might have that you've thought of after this presentation. Feel free to reach out. But thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Bye.